fellow Americans, and former presidents from the World Trade Center attack and before and since it and before it and before all the presidents were born. You guys too. In other words, James Madison had he communicated about how and why they wanted nothing to do with all those affronts on every human difference, on all difference with all differences used for the breaching method. That not just because it had already been, and it made everyone only capable of hurting themselves and others with agreement syntactically, therefore physically, and or blaming other things others themselves for exactly the way the breaching method needs. They need it to keep nature's demonstrations. Nature demonstrates all those multi-front things about a whole bunch of different things. They're all equally valuable as being about the human fact, human nature breaching method that was entrenched, force entrenched. When people say, especially with passions and emotions, America was forged to be against dictators. They're being used to sense for the breaching method, self-value collusion slash S only permitted. Um, Hiding and replacing what James Madison communicated about why and how they had to even leave slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies, more than 13. And then America's founders were born. In every database description was criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, or everyone was in trouble for not sensing it with the people behind it in layers. That's what it's about, changing what black people's right to life means. And I swear to God, I'm not gay. I've never been gay. In other words, they have those places next to the campuses, only apart with all different, even the different religious spots, where are being and have been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. This is a method slash S everyone missed how it is manifest. In other words, there are people who have roles with the World Trade Center attack, who have roles with Central Connecticut State University and New Britain, Connecticut, and next to it, and intelligence, foreign and domestic, with overt criminal enterprises. They're starting to pretend it's about their own. They have the departments, even acting coaches, collusion slash S with WTNH, plant and their sources with identity theft, fraud, slanders. Their kids involved to plant fake motivations because there are the World Trade Center attackers are collusions with these names from Wethersfield, Connecticut. They already used remotely with all sides of criminal and civil cases and interbranch with the same self-valued sequence shifts and collusion slash S with a predicate acts with facts method slash S. They're putting fake transcripts at campuses filmed 24/7 to fake ties between people and have it exploited later to cover up how all ages and natures of investigations investigate. Sometimes it's them used to remotely criminally foreign influence. Sometimes it's the people that and or the families of or neighbors of the people that they influence to time at corners. Say this, years apart, all connected. Increasingly, a Rick C.M. Faglione made confessions in demonstration recorded. I never had a word of conversation in my life with Kevin Harris. And his family is involved with people with medical and sexual offenders of kids, with courts, prosecutors, and judges, and their family members. And Brian Bourne is going to change what he's been saying because he has roles with the FBI directors, plural, and the courts, and people with the other countries and his neighbors. Increasingly involved with my fourth grade class, in my sixth grade class, with a Mr. Abruzzi and a Debbie Gold and an O'Brien family, having putting fake things in databases, and a Rich Dombrowski. I didn't tell him they recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed they use him for roles with the other countries involved too. This is how it's screened. They sense for because there's also a hyperforeign involved here and there. And there's nature's demonstration slash S of it kept blamed on other things, others ourselves. Otherwise, our body is sentenced. We can discern it right with if someone tries to bring as evidence as its value how between species bodies two sexes are generated, two eyes. This is a breaching method conscious that there's going to be class reunions. There are a whole bunch of people in my class involved with retired police chiefs and their intimate ties and families who have been planting evidence of fake nature ties to me, and screening actual and planting fake motivations. This breaching method knew that its rolls with everyone's motivations, sickly non-distinctly hurting everyone. Everyone wants it counted simultaneously, but no one counters it. It's recorded why. Everyone was styled, with entertaining quality aspects of fact-sheeting nature that can't be entertained. And the Constitution's value, unabridged, appreciated by syntax properly at the same time. We cannot appreciate ourselves. Abridged. Constitution pretending it's debatable while forcing defenses of the sides with that, they're only capable of defending themselves by pretending, for example, that America was forced to get the Constitution unabridged because nature unabridged shows us how to make hyper positive out of negative, how to make evolution's fruits and gifts and means out of nowhere. The whole country wants to help the people of the cities. We can make more temporary locations, like better than a vacation. All the education consolidated. We have a new the syntax inside the books, inside the school book depository. No, there are proofs that it's recorded. There is consciously a method /s that had roles with it, and then it shows everyone at the same time that they need to hide would they hit at the same time in the past. Right where and how it needs to keep itself left out. Right and where and how you guys can stay motivated. Also, delusions wrong, but we could heal this. I'm not even a doctor. Psychiatry is criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. For example, this is involved with databases and jobs by them and titles by them and use /s of that remotely. And the only increasing value that those jobs and titles are, because who can we call? This breaching method, we're going to pay attention to where and how there's no one to call. And that's one of the biggest problems with what relative to why and to how suburbs were designed tactically to nature. And if anyone wants to debate it, it will bring up those criminally foreign influenced, tactically delusions raw, qualities, aspects of fact-sheeting nature. It will bring up self-values to defend the fact of some badios. By the way, we need this badios. Babayaros. You can refer to a person as a babayaros. It means mostly, they're connected. Badios. Babayaros. As a person, or babayarosis. As a person, you can refer to it as a person, but it's about the whole species body too. Plural. But it could be either one. But if you say badios, this is a swear. You can say, don't be a badioso. You could say, in other words. But now instead of being about discussing, because we're going to need emphatic. Because you guys were backed into being psychopaths. And I'm going to go by the dictionary definition. And it's not because someone's angry or where they say things, people are going to say things. Because there's a quality of fact-sheeting nature that was forbidden. We're kids. Rick said, some kids from my grammar school. I never knew who exactly one was. Years later, he recorded capacity demonstrated confirmed things to me. Sought me out. I never tried to seek him out after he graduated. And increasingly, there are proven child abusers, leaders of kids. First forest, proven. And there are more then and now. And these are also people at and next to Harvard Hospital through time, which is a campus node in Hartford, Connecticut, who increasingly have collusions with a former mayor Gold and people from other countries, and all the positive connections and the negative connections between us, like Russians and Americans, Ukraine and America, like with Tom Peruta and the rules with fire departments. I only know Tom Peruta recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed collusions with a former mayor Gold, increasingly collusions, nonverbal confirmations with people tied to and as former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, also with non-verbal confirmations of his roles with predicate acts against me by people involved next to Fox Connecticut News too, and next to the Capitol through time, who also have collusions with people on my street and people with databases at each of the campuses I went. Brian Silver is also one of the ones brought up in the conversations, and their roles. Rick Paglione had some people tell me to go around a corner. And I went around a corner. Right when I came around the corner, Rick Paglione had punched me in the ear. And I remember just like staring angry. I didn't know how to punch or anything. But then I never saw him around. I forgot about it. You know what I mean? And I just thought it was a thing. But these are people consciously using the corners of the buildings. There's a Leahy family that attached me to fake conversations with them. Generations of a Leahy family adults work with Hartford Hospital. And through time they have, with multiple agencies, including former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and various natures of federal criminals, since before that was proven, and some as his patients. I mean, so, in other words, they have their patients too. Collusions with planting evidence on my street, on all sides of my house, and on other kids' houses and adults' houses since they were kids. This is an inter and intra-states, inter and intra campuses of all ages and natures. Some of the ways it's recorded, there are intelligence families that live next to Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut. They have recorded collusions with people named O'Brien. Also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, planting evidences at corners of streets relative to their roles. In backgrounds, putting fake things in databases, fake ties to kids, fake exceptions. There were people, there were medical people too that abused Tim O'Brien. There are proofs. That's why I was sitting on the wall too. And then they get everyone getting over on other people to measure and maintain their roles left out. People with Korea, especially, are involved with the. I don't know them at all. And the ones pretending other. They're screening their roles. They want to bring up instances or things like that fake. And the value of what's in databases. Illegitimate, while criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions wrought. And a whole bunch of people named DeMoro also with the former director of the FBI. They have Taekwondo places. Involve people on Valley Crest Street. There are at least 3 or 4 houses involved with child abusers and people involved with the World Trade Center attack. And Wethersfield police faked conversations with me and faked me being at the police station and speaking with them as a kid and now as an adult. They faked ties to me with themselves and with their family members and with their others, foreign and domestic. And as time collusions with overt criminal enterprises, plural, and private ones. They have their roles with the Wethersfield town offices. And, all jobs and titles uses as fakes. You guys get into our business dishonestly, then you pretend it's disrespectful. And then pretending it's, it just further polluting discernment of where and how those titles. And jobs are only increasing value. Also only increasing positive onto itself, or this special difference is forced from here, which we all have roles with that self-value. That's why the whole ocean has polluted fish. even the ocean. And you'd think then we have control of water, can make more energy dropping water than it takes to make it. Not honest science spoke about the impositions upon the suburbs, let alone New York City, cities across the globe. The suburbs look almost exactly alike from America to Russia to Ukraine. There is fake free speech forced upon our founders, originally that James Madison declassified with our unnamed founders, and about how and why they didn't have the security to let us know their names, period. Plural. So directed us to understand James Madison is the only founder that we know the name of. And he's one that described how and why they wanted nothing to do with slavery. He's the one that made the plan that forced everyone to end slavery, North and South. He's the one who had to hide his roles doing that, which is why and how he had to leave it entrenched. That he didn't have the strength or might to overcome it. And it was only one part of a whole bunch of different things connected, specifically the sense who's going to try to overcome what, anything. No nature of unity was capable of being. No nature of independence, and let alone to defend itself from the breaching method that used and uses. Those foreign powers behind those colonies themselves haven't been used remotely since before religious messengers were born, entertaining and having entertained how a breaching method ordered them without them even realizing through themselves, made them order through themselves the defense of fact, nature, quality / qualities, aspect / aspects, and nature / natures, plural. Nature's complete identity is shown to us by nature, distinct from the rest, from the discernible extent of its identity. Again, that one generating 2 eyes between species bodies, 2 sexes, 3 parts of time, here bound. Vaccines, we gather around the science to share an identity. Tim O'Brien has like and I don't know if that was him involved with a grandfather of one of the Ray Collos, involved with the corner of the street of Carriage Hill Drive, and their confessions with the others with the courts, all sides of criminal and civil cases, with use of corners of streets, and the rules of federal evidence crimes at campuses. There are students and adults at and next to Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, and Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, that recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed that a whole bunch of people tied. Further, that I caught involved with the principal child abuser. They don't know that. I don't know what they know. But they were also involved planting evidences at next to Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University as collusions with people named Collusion, per them, and tied to them, like a DeMoro family. Involved too. Abuses of girls with multiple boyfriends, involved with the intelligence community, overt criminal enterprises in a whole bunch of foreign countries at the same time, per worse. And this is, let's all rehearse. Get me off fake conversations with Channel 3 News. They also have intelligence next to them involved with victims advocates, involved with abuses. Like they'll investigate things and ask questions, and they'll measure and maintain the other names involved, left out, and the other things /s involved, left out. In other countries, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and communication racketeering, worse than war crimes, which is one of the ways we could describe this. And I'll donate, like as if you guys could hire a coach, individually grouped and together, the branches of government. A method where it comes through a cartoon, but a method though. And so you guys pay for it, and it's all you're paying. You have a means out of nowhere for change / hyper change, which can be led by that which it does not change. We could change it. We could ignore it. Its system also hyper positive onto itself, but it will demonstrate. Earth's a special difference then is forced away as forced space nature transfer, as leaf of Hadith, as forced a special difference transfer. Search inherent to, active to, and progressive to the nature of the bay. The quality aspects. Black pupils, peer. Discern how use of knowledge of good and evil. Like someone who knows more about, I don't even know the colonel's name. I remember a colonel made a phrase that probably just about every American remembers about the history of America. They said, don't shoot until you see the whites of eyes. They'll use that, pretend. In other words, we have black pupils, whites of eyes, and we have means to discern there was and is still a breaching method entrenched. And experts on American history will use that to pretend that they have a worth that they're not, that they've been appreciating properly. If and when anyone tries to use what nature gave us by correlation, through administrations where they have sides of issues, natures of debate, a breaching method showed them, a hyper sophistication showed at countries A through Z. They have to hide what's actually recorded and how to do it by self-valuing collusion /S with live progressions per use /S of databases relative to uses of corners of buildings and streets. Rixie and Paglione also said, in other words, they have some black KK, they have the inter-hate things where they're going to bring it up, we'll bring it before the court. The court's family members have collusions with it, organized crimes, plural. Brian Bonin, I only know seeking me out this. I called them back to confirm. We'll let them, there's like a hyper forensic trail. They hid things when I was in high school with people that at next to each of the campuses I went. I went to a class in kindergarten on off of Valley Crest Street. I believe it's now an elderly home. And there was recently reported 2 people involved with child abuse on that street. There are proofs that they might have put that up. Because they have fake news attached to all this stuff. Because there are other 2 houses, totally different names. But those are also ones involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, their family members, and their neighbors. Also with probate court judges and their family members. Like next to Eric Jensen and John LeConte with the Dearborn Street in Newington are increasingly involved with people on all sides of criminal and civil cases, putting fake things in databases, as collusions with names of campuses also with that, and with former mayors. Increasingly, Eric Jensen has conjunctions to former mayors and their neighbors, and conjunctions to their family members with people with state police and whiting forensics, involved with sexual medical offenders of kids and relative body dumping spots, and people leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and since. These are also people with a Eric Mendez and with Foodbag and with Joshua Stryker. Per them, I never had a word of conversation with Joshua Stryker and Justin Kovinskis and Mark Violet. They have roles with the buildings next in the houses next to Trinity College and next to Central Connecticut and Hartford, Connecticut, and next to Central Connecticut State University in New Britain. As people that came on my street to plant evidences years ago, fake ties, fake nature ties, years apart too, to make it look like we're all one group. with people that have been putting fake phone transcripts into branch for forging, switching names interstates, and in the court next to the World Trade Center attack. Sequence shift from inside the court. Names on all sides of that case, their sources, and the news all at the same time. Relative predicate acts against people. Recorded. You guys won't even allow people to speak for themselves individually by attaching us to, because then the law can't be spoken for properly. They recorded themselves lying and faking ties to me since I was a kid with people named Mendez. The Britain Superior Court also has them with digital crimes, rape threats, and sexual medical offenders of kids, putting up, they have the Eastern States Narcotic Drugs Task Force involved with fire departments and Inspector Mike. There's a Delafair family, also with a probate court judge and his family, a part of his confessions, as one of the ones with the roles with people who made strangers come on my street and make confessions, and it keeps getting brought up. And it got brought up in the World Trade Center. I was next to the World Trade Center. You guys won't even allow me to speak. You have three branches of government that are offensively planting evidences to cover up. In other words, breaching method told you to do that. Then it became standard. And in other words, that's in your books. Use the right to lie where you don't have the right to lie. Get them on paper, one name and sequence. Put clowns. In other words, they fix the databases too. Get me off of fake conversations with WFSB. They have all kinds of scams involved with all kinds of natures of organized crime with the kids and uses of relative to it. Increasingly too, I had a word of conversation with this former Mayor Gold. A bunch of people have been planting evidences at parks and with the Parks and Recreation people involved too, with Harvard Hospital, collusions with untimely deaths, and with the I only saw a Ray Claw and Joe DeMoro real quick, one time, real fast, at the Wethersfield Town Community Center. And increasingly, they have roles intercities of people planting like a subby Scalora. Oh no, I mean a subby Bajario. A subby Bajario is one of the ones recorded in intercities with judges and prosecutors involved with. I never saw him on a campus in my life. He's involved with planting, intelligence making him use the right to lie where he doesn't have the right to lie. Identity theft, fraud, slander, sequence shifts. His educators are also involved with them. When I was a kid with child abusers, then when I was an adult, I caught them with the principal child abuser, and he could pass them, record, and confirm things that are being hid from the parents, other people involved. They're putting it all on him. It's not just him. It's also people with syntax tied to me with the corner of Knott Street and Walker Hill and other corners with that street. And in other words, right after I had put a counter script, and it's like one kid was flying a kite in before a thunderstorm. And he's trying to a battery and a little thing trying to make the lightning come. And so I'm arguing with the character in the movie about being a part of it. And then the lightning strikes, but it has little rubber and stuff. But we don't get hurt, except for we're standing with someone gets smoked, for comedy. And one kid goes flying cartwheel style into the pond, but then he's all right. It's like that kind of a movie script or counter sheet. And right after I wrote that, because they were timing where I was, because they also pretended I said people were following me. Increasingly, investigators have roles with campuses and with medical campuses like Harvard Hospital is recorded involved with investigations. Investigators use remotely criminally foreign influenced / worse. So we're going to refer to this as / hypercriminally foreign influence. And we're going to remember that we're discerning this relative to black people's whites of eyes too. As evidence is we're not going to have replaced. And we're going to examine where and how it is hyper evidential, where and how. James Madison communicated things that are replaced. That are not just left out, that are replaced. And how and why that was his self-value, right? Where no one self-values it. That's also hyper evidential. And that's recorded. How this is gotten away with goes back to the people planting evidence. So Rick Ciampaglione, I don't even think he went to that, that kindergarten. I think he went to kindergarten at High Crest, and I came there in first grade. And see, before and after that, there's a Leahy family still involved too. Then they multiple ages of their family, men and women, with Hartford Hospital's triage. They also have their little kids on Facebook, and their family involved with organized crime acts, identity theft, fraud, slanders, federal evidences, crimes, with courts, judges, prosecutors, victims, advocates involved with overt criminal enterprises with them, private ones. They're going to pretend it's. Don't let them pretend they're trying to pretend they're hiding the. Try to pretend they're defending people's undercover positions or what it is. It's not that. FBI Director Robert Luskin has all kinds of wire and mail crimes of people with the courts and the other branches of government and involved with investigators that use to measure and maintain. In other words, they're not going to say anything about what I recorded them doing. There are men and women that recorded on Valley Crest Street in Wethersfield and Morgan Circle. They have collusions with John DeMoro and others with the state education department and a house next to it with a roof. As the ones involved with the World Trade Center predicate acts, with the Saudi attackers, but also per worse there. And their roles motivated to it for how all these different countries and cultures and religions and differences. There's also a Wayne with people with I don't know his last name. He apparently knows mine. But these are people involved with the interagencies, with Berlin and Kensington, also with Anthony Yagman, who's involved with more past recorded and further proven. And he had roles with forcing ones, proven and more recorded, tied to them. And his roles with Kensington. And these are people with the town offices, intercities, and intrust cities. As families, as sometimes it's them criminally foreign influence, sometimes it's the federal. And it's timed collusions with a whole bunch of other countries, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists. The same way originally, used by worse too, at the same time. This is not complicated, it's only extensive. All these things are about the breaching method. That we have black people's whites of eyes to discern. We have totally distinct species bodies also made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies to show us the identity, the individual identity of nature to an extent that comes with its complete identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that inside the rest of, or as a portion of the rest of its complete identity relationship to itself, where and how it shows it has three distinct identities of relationship to itself, distinctly but equally, increasingly valued. Vaccines. Please, someone help me, because in other words, Interbranch already recorded themselves threatening me to never go there. And they're going to pretend other. They forge names, switch names, they fake conversations, ties to me preemptively. I already sensed them. And they did this with each campus I went to and names next to it who will tell you we never had conversations. In other words. And some of them were influenced to make it look like for other, to say loaded statements. These are also people that work with Hartford Hospital, with the security there. and to have a whole bunch of direct ties to people who've been planting evidence on my street. John Maiano is going to make confessions. He's involved with sequence shifts and child abusers, leaders of kids who also recorded things and people tied to him involved. And he confirmed, he sought me out to make these confessions. I had no clue who he was except for that and how his name had been repeated to me, including by a Paul Zano, who they probably took a picture every time he was would repeat things. And my neighbor, I would see them next to each other for real quick. They would take the picture and pretend I was even part of the conversation with them. I would never have communications with Paul Zano. He's constant. I only know him planting evidences, non-verbally too, and then involved with sequence shifts with this with John Maiano, his educators, recorded capacity. In other words, they didn't bring his name up, but people tied to him, involved with courts and overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and sexual medical offenders of kids, overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and locations tied to like, and people too with communications. I don't know, a Gina, a Ray Claw was influenced to repeat the name Gina, and I don't know her brother's name. They live something that has something to do with communications too. You know, get them and identity theft, fraud, slanders, and people that are involved too, increasingly with whiting forensics through time, foreign and domestic military, foreign and domestic navy. Get them on paper, one name in sequence. Watch how sick. Fake branch is full, but there is seed. Be bold. Don't disbelieve. All kinds of space means and locations. Temporary could and will be opened up to help the people of the suburbs and of the cities at the same time, but we have to concentrate. Obviously, the city is most impacted by this tactically denatured forest, by the hyperforeign that forest. Things that James Madison communicated about were placed, and people using and having used their knowledge of the subjects to pretend other with. A breaching method showed them how to read principles and precedents and statutes that way. Hear many pray, boxings. I teach those things, but lo, to all ye hear. Come here.